Gates, would you like to condemn Microsoft's Azure program for leaking sensitive classified information to the CCP?
Well, we've got debanking back in the news. Welcome back to Moose on Loose. My name's David. Today, we've got a situation of debanking in Canada, which is throwing up some major red flags. Negotiations with Trump are ongoing as the premiers and Mark Carney scramble desperately to try to solve this situation. We've got some premiers working together, signing deals, others going completely against the grain. A whole lot of madness. Let's jump into this. Starting this one off, we got Canada bans Netflix after employees caught binge watching at work. Departments with the highest streaming include the Department of National Defense at over 3 terabytes, Public Services Procurement Canada with almost 3 terabytes, and Privy Council Office with about 1.5 terabytes volume per month. Lazy bones. Time to trim the workforce. Too many people watching Netflix at work. Moving ahead, this is an interesting chart that's going around here. It says, let this sink in. Canada, population 40 million, Saudi Arabia 38 million, main exports, oil, third largest reserves, oil, second largest reserves, and then a bunch of other ones here: forestry, coal, hydro, natural gas, fisheries, diamond, copper, nickel, iron ore, aluminum, silver. Saudi Arabia has oil byproducts, and silica. And down here it says national debt 2.1 trillion. Now this number could be right if you add in provincial debt. That's not just federal debt. Saudi Arabia 260 billion. Personal income tax rate 40% national average per person in Canada. Saudi Arabia 0%. Now 40%, I mean the typical tax rate for Canadians is like 20%, but if you add in all the taxes, property tax, GST, HST, all that stuff, it does reach up to about 40%. So depending how you're looking at this, this is accurate. Sales tax percentage 13% national average. Saudi Arabia 0. That is not true. Saudi Arabia in 2020 brought in a VAT tax of 15%. Citizen monthly oil check, no and yes. This is also kind of fudged. Saudi Arabia does give financial benefits to lower income citizens based on certain situations or projects. In 2023, they gave offset money for the VAT tax that they brought in. So stuff like that. So they do give some money. It's not quite as cut and dry as oil money checks. And free healthcare, yes and yes. At some point, I think I'll do an entire video on this because this is quite interesting. Regardless though, the national debt is the biggest one and it's the biggest difference. And on top of this, what you don't see on here is that Saudi Arabia has some of the cheapest energy, electricity, food, gas prices. Their cost of living is very low there. Now digging into the personal tax rate, we've got this video here from Pierre Poilievre who breaks this down from the new Fraser report.
Hi everyone. Congratulations, you're spending more money on taxes than on food, clothing, and shelter combined. That is the finding of the Fraser Institute's July 22nd, 2025 report, and it reports on last year, which shows that the tax burden of Canadians is up 2,784% since 1961, so just over 60 years ago, and that bill is vastly outstripping the bills that you pay for everything else. I'm going to quote directly from my laptop on this report. Taxes have grown much more rapidly than any other single expenditure for average Canadian families. Expenditures on shelter are up 2,100%, food up 927%, clothing up 460%. But the tax bill is up to 2,784%. So an absolutely staggering amount of money that is going to taxes. So the average family is spending 42% now on taxes. That is compared to 35% on food, clothing, and shelter. So you have to ask yourself, are you getting more from the government than you're getting from your private expenditures on food, clothing, and shelter? I have a hard time believing it. There are so many different taxes. We've got income tax, payroll tax, health tax, sales tax, property tax, profit tax, liquor, tobacco, amusement, and other excise taxes, fuel, motor vehicle license fees, and then other taxes. Then you've got natural resource taxes. These are the royalties that are paid when companies extract resources from the ground. And then, of course, there are import duties that you pay when you buy things from abroad. All of those fees, charges, and other levies amounting to a tax bill that is far greater than anything you spend on anything else. In fact, the report goes even further. On page 6, they show the overall tax bill that includes the deficit. Now, the reason they do that is that deficits are taxes. You're taxed two ways through government deficit spending. One is through the deferred bill that you'll get later on, because of course deficits do have to be paid back one way or the other, and that bill does come to you. And the second way that deficits charge you is they increase the money supply, which causes inflation. And that inflation does charge you. It's a tax as well.
Essentially adding more money, diluting the value of money, meaning it's a silent tax, making every dollar worth less. It's the most sinister tax that there is out there. And you got to think, who's the number one person in Canada who loves to turn on the money printer? Now, your first reaction might be Tiff Macklin, and maybe that's right. But Mark Carney, both those guys, bankers, that's their one option they have for dealing with the economy. Turning on the old money printer, well, that dilutes our money, making every dollar worth less.
And they show here that since 1961, that bill has grown dramatically as well, to the point where it is now higher than in any year except for the 2020 COVID year, which is, of course, a very unusual year indeed. But the point is that government's insatiable appetite is causing you a tremendous burden. It's like the private sector is a skinny man and the government is a fat man on his back. And the private sector is carrying that increasingly fat man up an increasingly steep hill. It's time to put him on the diet. It's time to reduce the cost of government. We need to cut bureaucracy, consultants, foreign aid, corporate welfare, and countless other things to bring down the cost of government. We also need
Yeah, and Mark Carney's increasing consultant spending. He's jacking that up by billions. Foreign aid, that's not going anywhere. They're going to increase all of this stuff. That's why Mark Carney's running this record deficit. And where's Chrystia Freeland? Is she going to bail on the situation this time again because the deficit's so high? Or was it a plan to just get rid of Trudeau and get Carney installed? Tell me again how Canada is not broken. We don't need bigger government. We need bigger freedom. Moving ahead here, we've got this one. This is quite the scene here. We've got Wab Kinew has chosen to not sign an interprovincial trade agreement unveiled Tuesday by Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario, citing the need for Indigenous consensus before moving forward with major infrastructure projects. What a joke. I don't get what's going on here. A treaty agreement was signed 100 and something years ago. First Nations are the same as any other Canadian. Well, that's not true. They have more rights. They get free money, free education, but they should be treated just like every other Canadian. Sadly, some Canadians are worth more than others, and Wab Kinew is proving this here. Wab Kinew saying 5% of Canada's population gets to dictate and govern what happens for the other 95%. Not a good look, Wab. This will make it so much easier for us Albertans to walk away. BC will do the same. Of course he did. Since when did Indigenous groups get to control infrastructure for the other 95% of Canadians? This is getting ridiculous. Canada is cooked. We'll never get free trade within our own borders. So much for tearing down these interprovincial barriers. Moving ahead, we've got quite the story here of debanking. We've got Eva Cpac. This is a Freedom Convoy lawyer. She got this letter from RBC. She says, well, I wasn't expecting this from RBC. Welcome to Canada, where tyranny has great customer service. What is this letter? It says, personal and confidential, termination of banking relationship. As a federally regulated financial institution, RBC is required by law to comply with applicable legislation. These laws require that we implement certain processes and procedures that directly support the formulation of RBC's positions with respect to risk. After careful consideration, we regretfully advise you that the recent activity in your accounts is outside of RBC's client risk appetite. And subsequently, we are no longer in a position to continue our banking relationship with you. We recognize you will need to seek an alternative financial institution to support your banking needs, and we ask that no later than August 18th, 2025. Termination date. This is unbelievable. Western Standard did an article on this. He's got a snippet of it here. It says, if financial institutions can cut you off without explanation, without notice, and without due process, that is a serious problem in a free society, she stated. It creates fear and uncertainty, especially when there is no transparency or recourse. We need to have serious conversation about the power banks hold and what protections Canadians have, because right now any protections are quickly eroding. The question is, why are they debanking her? Well, she went there and talked to someone. She's an audio clip. As she says here, oh, I know, but that was part of the problem for them. I moved some money, then they froze the account, then lectured me about it before releasing my money. Have a listen.
So what was your first question again?
The first question was, how did you learn about this opportunity with the cryptocurrency?
Yeah, I was at a Bitcoin conference.
Okay. Is there a third party involved, or is this all on your own merit?
Yeah, it's all on my own merit. And just for the recording, I'm doing this totally against my will because Royal Bank is not allowing me to access my own money without these questions being answered that I totally am not comfortable with. Continue.
Do you have full access to your own crypto wallet? No
Yes,
one else
I
has
do.
Access. Okay. Are you able to withdraw funds from there if you need from the cryptocurrency?
Of course I can. It's much easier than the way Royal Bank is treating me at the moment, in fact.
That's fair. I'm just asking you some questions.
Yeah,
that
which are,
policy.
yeah,
Yeah.
that you've made up.
Were you promised a specific rate of return?
No, I wasn't.
Okay. Were you
What an unbelievable question to ask, where you promise a specific rate of return.
asked to install any software on your computer?
No, I wasn't.
Okay. How long have you been investing in crypto approximately? Is this a brand new thing? Have you
No,
been doing-
years.
Years? Okay. And you are able to sign into the crypto website yourself, sell, trade, and withdraw all on your own.
Much easier than with the Royal Bank, as I'm
Perfect.
experiencing right now.
I will answer those questions and I will get back to you.
Thank you so much.
So clearly this is a crypto problem. She invested in some crypto and they didn't like it. So I have an RBC account. I tried to invest in crypto a while ago and they blocked it. This was probably 4 or 5 years ago. They blocked the transaction. They wouldn't even let me move some money over to my Coinbase account. Ironically enough, last year a hacker got a hold of my Coinbase account. So I don't think I even have it anymore. Not like there was any money in there, but it appears to me that they are locking down her account and debanking her, kicking her out of RBC because she's investing in crypto. And as she posts here, I am confused. RBC allows you to buy iShares Bitcoin ETF. I mean, it's right here on their own website. So what's the deal here, guys? Is this really about Bitcoin? Is it because she was a Freedom Convoy lawyer? I don't think this is going to end well for RBC because there's already a bunch of people saying they're going to pull out. And I've already been talking about how miserable experience I've had with RBC. Somebody was able to wire transfer all of my money out of my account to Milan without my signature. And when I went in there to question them on it and say, hey, where's my money? They said they couldn't get the money back until I started yelling in an RBC. A manager came out and then told me they would give me my money back. If they didn't, then there would have been real problems. I probably would have went to the police first, and if that didn't work, then I probably would have hired a lawyer and sued them into the Stone Age. But this has almost got 1 million views and a ton of people saying they're leaving RBC now. Was this worth it to them? And along the same lines here, we got this one from the JCCF. A judge has demanded to see records from TD Bank and the RCMP regarding 2022 freezing of bank accounts of a Freedom Convoy participant.
How many Canadians had their bank accounts frozen by the government?
It was between 200 and 300 Canadians had their bank accounts frozen. No, that doesn't include some. I was talking to a friend just recently. His bank account was not frozen, but he had trouble dealing with his account because there's so many people were going to the bank to withdraw cash. That banking system started to verge into a crisis of sorts.
Yeah, I know some local people that had the same thing. They went to get their money out and the bank gave them nothing but gears on how to get their money out. And it said they can only take this much out. And they were just like even got more worried at that point. And I remember the one high profile case that was that bakery on the island there that had her bank account frozen because she'd made a donation to the Freedom Convoy.
That is absolutely absurd. A bakery had their account frozen because they made a donation to the Freedom Convoy.
It's an absolute disgrace. We turned into a banana republic with polar bears. You know, we Canadians used to look down on third world regimes and repressive dictatorships where in some countries it's normal. If you criticize the prime minister or the president, next day you're suddenly facing charges for murder or rape or fraud or something, and you're locked up in jail. And everybody knows it's because you criticize the prime minister, because they don't have those checks and balances in place with the rule of law where, you know, the crown is impartial, or the prosecuting office.
John makes a great point here. We are sliding a slippery slope into one of those countries where there is no real rule of law. The Liberals just have laws apply however they like it and not how they're supposed to apply equally to everyone. And while this story goes back to 2022, there was a PPC member during the last election, just before the election, that had their bank account frozen for whatever reason. This was just a few months ago, 5 months ago, 6 months ago. This whole bank account freezing thing is seriously draconian. And RBC, with this kind of thing, you're going to lose some serious trust. People will be pulling their money in droves in the next week here. Good luck with that. Moving ahead to the Trump tariff situation, we've got this one from CBC Watcher, where they're talking about dairy cartel in Canada. We've got rice farmers in Japan.
There is. I mean, vast differences as well, right? There's about 1,700,000 to 1 million rice farmers in Japan. There's about 9,000 dairy farmers in Canada. So a vastly different sort of setup. But I think, you know, it's kind of like when I was watching the Jays game last night. I watched the batter who's in the on deck circle, and they're watching the pitch. They're trying to get information out of that. The Canadian delegations are watching all these pitches, trying to figure out what information they can get. This notion that Trump wants more access to every market is not new. We've known that. He's been demanding that on a bunch of fronts. The dairy one is one he keeps coming back to. And it's worth remembering that Donald Trump himself negotiated unprecedented access to Canada's dairy industry in the 2016 renegotiation of NAFTA. And there is a sense that, they could still increase that margin, give him a win, but keep supply management in place if that's the choice, right? Like there is vast debate in this country, not a lot of debate in the economics community about the benefits of supply management. There's a lot of people who say, look, this artificially keeps the price of milk high for Canadian families. What are we doing protecting that?
Exactly. I just said that yesterday. It doesn't benefit Canadians, period. Get rid of the whole system.
As opposed to trying to make a deal with Trump. But that's sort of an internal fight that's going on. The politics of it are a very different thing, a little bit like they are in Japan. That opening up of the rice market, deeply protected, hugely important, and almost symbolic to Japanese people. So is there some similarity there? Sure, but we also just have to take a breath. This notion of the August 1st deadline is it was kind of always artificial, right? At first it was July 9th and then July 15th or July 21st, I think, was the Mark Carney one. And then Trump came out and blew that up and said August 1st. And that has continually moved down. We'll see how it goes. We'll certainly see how it goes if they continue to extend the CUSMA compliant carve out, right? If the tariffs still apply to steel, aluminum, and the auto industry. But 90% or nearly 90% of trade going into the United States, in spite of that, is still tariff-free, is still duty-free because of the CUSMA compliant deal. So long as that extends, I don't think there's a huge rush on either side to try to make this happen immediately.
I think the steel, copper, and auto industries would beg to differ. Plants have shut down. People are out of work. There needs to be a deal yesterday, like last week, last month. Mr. American Mark Carney isn't doing a deal. He doesn't need a deal. His investments are in America. We're dumping milk because of supply management. Seems like new management is needed. I should note too, as for my list, haven't been talking about it much recently just because all the news that's going on, but we're going to be getting back to breaking these down one by one coming soon. There's a ton of information here to go through. So moving on, CBC, we've got this one. It says liberal pundits are now fully managing expectations, cheering on a tariffs up, Carney elbows down deal with Trump.
With Japan for just a second, because my producer and I have been going back and forth on this. When we look at what was reached with Japan on auto imports, they were going to face 27.5%. It's now lower. Is that a good or bad indicator as to the negotiations with Canada when it comes to our auto sector?
Look, I'm going to choose to interpret it as a positive sign. If you are a glass half full sort of guy, and you and I we're very positive, hopeful people, then you look at that and say he was willing to lower that tariff to something lower, 15% on autos in Japan. Maybe he'll do the same for Canada. That probably would suggest that he would do the same for Mexico, and that would be the rate. And so the policy doesn't become really about repatriating auto manufacturing entirely to the United States, but rather it allows Trump to say, look, we're going to get more money from foreign auto sector, and that's going to allow us to fill our treasury. So that's the optimistic way of looking at it. The pessimistic way of looking at it, as I mentioned, is he's really just saying, you know what, good enough. American auto, Japanese auto, that's it. Everybody else, we're going to continue to tariff high, make it virtually impossible for them to continue to manufacture and try to drive our auto sector right into the dirt. Let's hope to goodness that's not where he's thinking.
I hope he stretched before trying to turn himself into a human pretzel to justify Carney's humiliating failure. Isn't that the truth? Scott Reed here, trying his best to ease things out here. Mark Carney has failed. He is going to fail because he's basically an American. That's why he's failing. He doesn't care about getting a deal for us. He's likely protecting rich friends who are invested in the dairy cartel. They know who pays their bills. This cover for Carney by mainstream media is disgraceful and shows that journalism in Canada is dead. Meanwhile, in America, we've got this bombshell. Microsoft gave CCP access to U.S. military secrets. Navy whistleblower Tom Schiller just dropped national security nuke. Basically said Chinese engineers were granted access to classified U.S. military systems through Microsoft Azure for over a decade. Loomers and Charles confronted Bill Gates on camera demanding answers.
Gates, would you like to condemn Microsoft's Azure program for leaking sensitive classified information to the CCP?
Yeah. And then I think that...
Are you pro-CCP, Mr. Gates? I understand your foundation owns a lot of Microsoft shares now, and your Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has heavily financed and is financially connected to the CCP. So is that why you're not answering?
Bill Gates doesn't care. He's just like all these other lefties. He doesn't care. It's all about the money. And we've got this one. It says, holy smokes, a political nuke just went off in the White House. This one's talking about evidence that was found and released directly to point to President Obama, leading to the manufacturing of intelligence assessment of the Trump-Russia scandal. So this is in regards to Russia hacking and getting involved in the U.S. elections.
Any of this new information implicates former President Obama in criminal behavior?
We have referred and will continue to refer all of these documents to the Department of Justice and the FBI to investigate the criminal implications of this.
For even former
The
President
evidence,
Obama?
correct. The evidence that we have found and that we have released directly point to President Obama leading the manufacturing of this intelligence assessment. There are multiple pieces of evidence and intelligence that confirm that fact.
Holy smokes, Obama is going to prison. Yeah, not likely. So we'll see what happens with this. There's a lot of stuff going on in America too. This is quite the story. So we've got Tulsi Gabbard here declassifying this report that exposes the Obama administration. It says a previously classified report, which he says points to treasonous conspiracy to undermine the results of the 2016 presidential election. This is Donald Trump's first term. Democrats said the White House is trying to distract from the ongoing controversy surrounding the decision to not publish files relating to Joffrey Eggstein. It could be. If you look at that situation, Peter Thiel helped J.D. Vance get elected. Peter Thiel also connected to Joffrey Eggstein. Was there a favor to try to sweep it under the rug? Are they bringing this up now just because of this? They also adjourned early for summer by 1 day so they wouldn't have to deal with this. It was declassified on Wednesday, a day after President Trump accused former President Barack Obama for leading an effort to falsely tie him to Russia and undermine the 2016 election campaign. These bizarre allegations are ridiculous and weak attempt at distraction, a spokesperson for Obama said in response on Tuesday. The declassified report says the CIA did not adhere to the tenets of analytic standards, used one scant, unclear, an unverified fragment of a sentence from one of the substandard reports to conclude that Russia's Vladimir Putin wanted Trump to win. This is absolute madness down in America. There's a lot of questions here. Why are they declassifying this right now in the heat of the Joffrey Eggstein pressure cooker? Is this a deflection to get away from that? There's a lot of heat coming from the kitchen. The question is, who's cooking?